Hey everyone, and welcome back to BuildBytesDaily. Today we're going to talk about a React hook that's kind of like a secret weapon. You might not use it all the time, but when you really need it, man, useImperativeHandle is an absolute lifesaver.
So yeah, we're doing a deep dive on useImperativeHandle. It's the specialized hook that helps you write way cleaner, much more robust React components. It solves a very specific problem that, I bet, has tripped you up more than once. So let's get right into it.
So picture this. You've got a form, and there's a button way up in the parent component. You need that button to set the focus on an input field that's buried deep inside a child component. How in the world do you reach across that boundary to tell that input to focus?
Now, your first thought, and pretty much everyone's first thought, is to use a ref. You just forward a ref down to the child, slap it on the DOM node, and, well, it works. But there's a catch. A pretty big one, actually. You've just handed the parent component full, unrestricted access to that child's internal DOM.
And that right there is the big problem with just using raw refs. It creates what I like to call an unruly API. Handing over a direct ref is like giving the parent the master key to the child's entire house. They can go in, rearrange the furniture, paint the walls, they can do whatever they want, and that's not always a good thing.
What this really does is it breaks a fundamental rule of good component design, encapsulation. Your parent component suddenly knows way too much about the internal guts of your child component. So if you decide to refactor that child later on, everything could just break. Your components become fragile and really hard to maintain.
So what's the solution? How do we get that control back? Well, this is where useImperativeHandle comes into play. I want you to think of this hook as a way to build a custom remote control for your component. Instead of giving the parent the master key, you're giving them a remote with just a few specific buttons they're allowed to press.
And that's literally what it is. The official definition says it lets you customize the handle exposed to the parent. Now, handle is just a fancy word for what ref.current is going to point to. So instead of it pointing to the raw DOM node, it points to a custom object you get to design.
Okay, let's look at how it's structured. Don't worry, it's simpler than it looks. First, you give it the ref coming down from the parent. Second, you give it a function, a createHandle function, and this is where you build and return that custom remote control object. And last, there's an optional dependency array, the usual suspect, just like in useEffect, which will rebuild your handle if any of those values change.
All right, theory's great, but code is better, right? Let's jump into a real example and see how we can build one of these limited APIs we've been talking about.
So here's our mission. We have a custom input component. We want the parent to be able to do two things and only two things. Call focus on it and scroll into view. That's it. No messing with styles, no reading values, nothing else.
Okay, so check out the child component here, myInput.js. See what's happening? We create an internal ref called inputRef for the actual input element. Then useImperativeHandle steps in and intercepts the ref coming from the parent. And this is the magic right here. Inside our function, we return a brand new object that only has two methods on it, focus and scroll into view. We've built our custom remote.
And now, look what happens from the parent's point of view. It's brilliant. We call ref.current.focus, and boom, it works perfectly. But then we try to get sneaky and change the style, ref.current.style, and nope, crash. Our app will throw an error. Why? Because style doesn't exist on our custom remote control. We've totally protected our component's internals.
And that's the whole point, right there. We've defined a contract. We've created a clean, intentional, public API for our component. The parent knows exactly what it's allowed to do, and the child is totally free to change its internal implementation without ever worrying about breaking the parent.
But wait, there's more. It gets even cooler than that. This isn't just about limiting access to existing DOM methods. We can use this to invent brand new, completely custom methods for our components. Let's see how.
Okay, for our next example, let's level up the complexity. Imagine you've got a blog post component. It's got a long list of comments, and at the very bottom, there's an input field to add a new comment. We want to give the parent one single method that does two things at once, scrolls down to the comments, and puts the cursor right in that input field.
Just look at how clean this is for the parent component. It calls one single beautiful method, scroll and focus add comment. That method doesn't exist on any DOM element anywhere. It's a totally custom action that we invented just for our post component.
So how does this work? Well, inside that post component, you'd probably have two internal refs, one for the comment list, one for the input field. And useImperativeHandle is what orchestrates the whole thing, exposing that one powerful method that coordinates both actions. It's a fantastic way to encapsulate complex behaviors.
Okay, so right about now, you're probably thinking, this hook is amazing, and you're going to use it everywhere. But hold on. We have to talk about the most important part of this whole explainer, knowing when not to use this hook. There is a golden rule.
And the golden rule straight from the React docs is this: if you can do something with props, you should not be using a ref. So if you catch yourself wanting to make open and close methods for a modal component, stop. That's a huge sign that what you really need is an eyes open prop.
And this slide shows it perfectly. On the left, you've got the imperative way, calling methods on a ref. On the right, you have the declarative, the React way, controlling the component with props. This is what you should always prefer, because it keeps your data flowing in one predictable direction. So if we shouldn't use it for controlling state, then what is it good for? When do we actually reach for this thing?
The ideal use cases are for actions, not for state. Things like programmatically scrolling to an element, focusing an input, triggering a quick one-off animation, or managing text selection. These are all imperative behaviors that just don't fit neatly into the declarative props-first world.
So let's wrap this all up. Think of useImperativeHandle not as a hammer you should use for everything, but as a scalpel. It's a precise, specialized tool for those rare moments when you absolutely must break out of the declarative model to create a clean imperative API. Use it wisely, and always, always think props first.
And that is a wrap on useImperativeHandle. I really hope this explainer helped make things clear. If you found this useful, you know the drill. Go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to BuildBytesDaily for more deep dives into the tools we use every single day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.